And that is, earlier I said that Michael Scriven discovered goal-free evaluation. And that's because it has existed as epitomized by Consumer Reports magazine. The Consumers Union came about roughly 1920s, and since then they have been doing goal-free product evaluation ever since. They don't ever ask a car company what their goals are with their particular car. They measure the specifications, they report on those specifications, and then they do all kinds of performance tests. That's how I like to analogize goal-free evaluation. It's just roughly the same thing, except we're doing it with a program rather than with a product. So, and that's why I say here, goal-free evaluation, it works in practice but doesn't work in theory. So, it's been happening for years. Now it's kind of working, what I like to call reverse engineering it, working backwards to say, why does this work? And how do we get it to work? And what is the methodology behind it? Which leads me to the 4 underlying principles that are fairly fundamental to goal-free evaluation. So the first one is identify the relevant effects by observation, measurement, etc. Identify what occurred without the prompting, of course, of the goals and objectives. Determine if what occurred can be attributed to the program or the intervention that's being delivered. And then lastly, determine to which degree those effects are positive, negative, or neutral. Also, you'll see on your handout that I gave you a list, and I'm not going to read them all to you by any means, but you'll see I have a list of goal-free evaluation do's and don'ts. And to help legitimize this list, I had people like Michael Scriven, and what do you see? Michael Scriven, Daniel Stufflebeam, James Sanders, Chris Corin, several others, Michael Quinn Patton. They all helped me by critiquing this this list of the do's and don'ts for goal-free evaluation. In fact, those people I just listed all have claimed to have tried goal-free evaluation, although only a handful of them have published anything based on those. But Michael Quinn Patton, James Sanders, Daniel Stufflebeam, they all have done, claim to have done a goal-free evaluation. So they helped me with this list of the do's and don'ts. On the don't side, there's only really 2. Don't try to find the goals and objectives, and don't communicate with program staff or administration about the goals and objectives. So I like this quote because it again helps remind me about the inherent danger in if you're only looking at the goals and objectives. And so GFE, or goal-free evaluation, really helps you avoid that sometimes very distracting rhetoric of goals and objectives. Whose goals? Why not this group's goals? In fact, I've worked with several programs where you ask one administrator what the goals are. They're not the same goals as what the other administrator says. So they don't always necessarily agree on what the goals are. And then there's the whole difference between what's a true goal versus what's on paper goal. And I think we all have been in situations where that can be an issue. You know, on paper I'm supposed to be doing this, but that's not really what I'm doing. And so this helps avoid that rhetoric. You're not worrying about the rhetoric of goals. You're just going out and seeing what the program, in this case, is doing. Another example that I like to use, and I'll leave you with 2 short examples. And one is not actually a goal-free evaluation itself, but it is an example of a side effect turning out to be a main effect. And in the 1960s, when Head Start first came onto the scene in the United States, and for those of you that don't know, Head Start is an early education, early childhood education program. Its goal was to, and its stated goal was to provide education and school readiness for kids and get them prepared for kindergarten. The initial evaluations were very mixed and mediocre at best. Well, one of the effects that was considered at the time a side effect ended up justifying the continuation of Head Start. And that was, Head Start employed at the time tens of thousands, roughly, of primarily low-income mothers of these kids to work in these schools, in these Head Start centers. And that wasn't intended. They didn't really think about that at the time. Now, and then afterwards, that became one of the justifications politically for continuing to fund Head Start. And that, again, was a side effect that later on and now is considered kind of a main effect. Now they intentionally try to find family members of the children to be working in the Head Start centers. The second example I have for you is in my own goal-free evaluations that I've done. And for example, I did a goal-free evaluation of a middle school, summer school program for middle school kids who had failed 3 or more core classes during the regular school year, which I don't even know. I mean, there's more than 3, but yeah. So math, science, reading. They failed 3 or more courses in the regular school year, and so they had to go to summer school. So the goal-based team, they spent all their time doing pre and post tests. Back up. This was an example of where I was a goal-free evaluator, and then we had a goal-based team of 4 evaluators. And so my method was primarily focusing on interviews, direct observation, some document analysis, etc. Where the goal-based evaluators primarily focused on, not exclusively, but primarily focused on test scores in math, science, and reading. So one of the side effects that I now know is a side effect was that to reduce the amount of distraction, and instead of allowing kids from wandering around the halls unaccompanied, they bought Dasani water bottles for the students to have at their classroom and have at their desk. A little bit of distraction having a water bottle, but basically they were pretty good with that. What we found out that later on, when I started doing some interviews about what you like about the program, what was good, what did you do every day, some of those types of questions, turned out one of the things that almost every student identified that they really enjoyed was every day somebody got to be picked to be the bottle recycler and take those bottles and put them in a box and bring them down to the office where they got recycled. That was obviously not an intention of the program to do that. However, was that a make or break effect? No, not really. I mean, the program had nothing to do with that. However, it was a big enough effect that once in the evaluation report I pointed this out, that program in subsequent years and still today has now a component about environmentalism and about conservation. So again, it's not the type of thing that would have made or break the program, fund it or not fund it based on that. However, they found it important enough that there was an opportunity for them to take advantage of the fact that students were engaged in that and really enjoyed the environmental or conservation aspect of it, and they put that and developed that and stuck it into their program as a component. So that's just an example of goal-free evaluation, identifying a side effect, and later on it being valuable enough to make it into a somewhat main effect or a purpose in the program. So lastly, I'll just leave you with what I was hoping to do with this presentation. And that is 2 things. For those social workers in the room is to have you hear about this method, because you may not have ever heard about it before, and consider it, because I think it's potentially valuable. I'm not advocating it for every case in all cases. I think it's a great tool that should be in your tool belt of evaluation tools. I also like the fact that it's very consumer focused. Instead of focusing on managers, here's the goals, you just evaluate what we tell you to evaluate. Here we're kind of oftentimes going to the consumer and asking that consumer, what's happening? How is this happening? What's been good, what's been bad? And the other thing, the other purpose here is kind of a call to action. For those who are doing goal-free evaluation, as I mentioned earlier, to publish your case studies on it, to do studies on it. In particular, I'm really interested in comparative studies, comparing goal-free evaluation with theory-driven, or goal-based evaluation, or goal achievement evaluation, or any of the other potential models out there. Because whenever I bring this up, I have a lot of people who kind of poo-poo it pretty immediately, and I say, that's fine, but show me the evidence that it's not any good. And I know that there's not any. So I'm saying, not that I'm providing the evidence that it's necessarily good. I'm just saying that's a question. I don't know. I think it's valuable enough to find out and to spend some time investigating whether it is valuable, and if it is valuable, in what conditions is it valuable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellent timing. We have